The blood-red horizon swallowed the setting sun as Zara Zimmerman's stagecoach rattled into Concord, Colorado territory in the autumn of 1873. Her knuckles whitened around the leather-bound journal in her lap, her last connection to the life she'd left behind in Boston. The frontier town appeared through dust-coated windows, a single dirt road lined with wooden buildings, some still bearing fresh-cut lumber scents, while others weathered under years of harsh mountain seasons. "Last stop, Concord," the driver called, bringing the team of 4 horses to a halt outside the town's only hotel. Zara stepped down from the coach, her burgundy traveling dress immediately collecting a layer of frontier dust. At 24, she had traveled farther west than any woman in her family before her, leaving behind the comforts of Boston society to accept a position as Concord's new schoolteacher. "Miss Zimmerman," a portly man with a gray walrus mustache approached, hat in hand. "Mayor Jenkins, we've been expecting you." "Thank you for meeting me, Mayor," Zara replied, extending a gloved hand. "I'm eager to begin my duties." "The schoolhouse isn't quite ready, needs a new roof and some benches. Should be finished by week's end. For now, you'll be staying at Mrs. Peterson's boarding house, best place in town for a respectable lady." Zara glanced around the main street as the driver unloaded her trunk. Men in dusty clothes moved between the saloon and general store, while a few women hurried along the boardwalks with baskets. The town seemed smaller than she'd imagined, rougher too. "Is there a doctor in Concord?" she asked, remembering her promise to her father to seek proper medical care for her recurring cough. The mayor's expression darkened. "We had one. Dr. O'Malley passed 6 months ago. His son runs the ranch outside town now." "His son isn't a doctor." "Owen?" "No, miss. Army surgeon during the war, but—" Jenkins trailed off, his eyes drifting toward the mountains. "He doesn't practice anymore. Keeps to himself these days." Something in the mayor's tone suggested there was more to the story, but before Zara could inquire further, a woman's voice called out, "You must be our new teacher." A plump, pleasant-faced woman bustled toward them. "I'm Martha Peterson. You'll be staying with me until you decide on more permanent arrangements." As Mrs. Peterson led her toward a 2-story clapboard house at the edge of town, Zara couldn't help but feel the weight of dozens of curious eyes upon her. In a town this size, a new face, especially an unmarried woman from the East, was bound to cause a stir. The boarding house was modest but clean, with a small bedroom that would be Zara's own. After weeks of travel, the simple washstand and feather mattress seemed luxurious. "Supper's at 6, Mrs. Peterson informed her. "Most of my boarders are men working on the new rail line, but they're respectful sorts. I'll introduce you to everyone." Left alone, Zara unpacked her clothes and teaching materials, arranging her books on the small shelf by the window. The view looked out toward rolling plains that eventually rose into the distant mountains. Somewhere out there was the O'Malley Ranch. Dinner that evening was a boisterous affair. The railroad workers were indeed respectful, if curious about the fancy Eastern lady who'd come to teach. Mrs. Peterson served a hearty stew with freshly baked bread, and Zara found herself enjoying the company despite her fatigue. "So what brings you all the way out here, Miss Zimmerman?" asked a red-haired man named Sullivan. "Boston ladies don't usually venture this far west unless they're chasing a husband." "I came for the position," Zara replied firmly. "My father was a teacher, and I followed in his footsteps. When I saw the advertisement for a schoolteacher in Colorado, I decided it was time for an adventure of my own." "Well, you've certainly found one," Mrs. Peterson said with a laugh. "Concord might be small, but we've got characters aplenty." "Tell her about O'Malley," one of the men suggested, which prompted immediate murmurs around the table. Mrs. Peterson shot the man a disapproving look. "Owen O'Malley is a private man who deserves our respect," she said firmly. "His father was our town doctor for 30 years before passing this spring. Owen fought in the war, came back different like many men did. Now he runs the family ranch and keeps to himself." "Different how?" Zara asked before she could stop herself. "Some say he carries the war with him still," Mrs. Peterson replied quietly. "Others say it's grief for his father. Either way, he rarely comes to town except for supplies. And when he does, Sullivan added, everybody knows to give him space. The conversation moved on to other topics, but Zara found herself wondering about the mysterious rancher who had abandoned medicine after the war. She recognized the description of a man haunted by his experiences. She'd seen similar shadows in her own father's eyes after he'd returned from battlefield hospitals where he'd volunteered as a medical assistant. The next morning, Zara rose early and asked Mrs. Peterson for directions to the schoolhouse. She wanted to see what she would be working with, even if it wasn't ready yet. The schoolhouse stood at the edge of town, a simple one-room building with a partially completed roof. Tools lay scattered around, suggesting the workers had left in haste the previous day. Zara stepped inside, envisioning where she would place the desks, how she would arrange her teaching materials. A sudden crashing sound from outside startled her. Hurrying to the doorway, she saw a wagon had overturned near the general store. A man lay sprawled in the dirt beside it, clutching his leg. Without thinking, Zara lifted her skirts and ran toward the accident. A small crowd was already gathering. "Stand back! Give him air!" she commanded, kneeling beside the injured man. "Sir, can you hear me?" The man nodded through gritted teeth. Blood seeped through his trousers where a jagged piece of wood had pierced his thigh. "We need to get him to a doctor," someone said. "There isn't one," another replied. "Not since old Doc O'Malley passed." Zara assessed the situation quickly. "I've had some training in first aid. We need to stop the bleeding and remove the wood carefully. Can someone fetch my bag from Mrs. Peterson's? And we'll need clean water and bandages." As people scattered to get the supplies, the injured man grabbed Zara's arm. "It hurts something fierce, miss." "I know. We'll help you, but you must stay still." She turned to the onlookers. "Is there somewhere we can take him?" "My store has a back room," offered an older man. "I'm Thomas Beck, own the general store." With the help of several men, they carried the injured worker to the back room of the store and laid him on a table. Zara's medical bag arrived, and she immediately set to work cleaning around the wound. "This needs proper stitching," she muttered, more to herself than anyone else. "I can clean it and bandage it temporarily, but—" "Someone's gone for O'Malley," Mr. Beck said. "Whether he'll come or not is another matter." Zara nodded, focusing on her task. She had just finished cleaning the wound when a hush fell over the room. She looked up to see the crowd parting for a tall man in a dust-covered duster coat. He moved with the deliberate grace of someone accustomed to command, his face partially obscured by the shadow of his hat. When he reached the table, he removed his hat, revealing dark hair streaked with premature gray at the temples, and eyes the color of a winter sky. "What happened?" His voice was deep, rusty with disuse. "Wagon accident," Zara replied, straightening. "The wood splintered and pierced his thigh. I've cleaned it, but—" "You've done well," the man interrupted, studying her work with a clinical eye. "I'll take over now." Without another word, he set his saddlebag on the table and began removing instruments. His movements were precise, economical, betraying years of practice despite what the mayor had said about him no longer being a doctor. Zara stepped back, watching as he worked. This had to be Owen O'Malley. He spoke little as he extracted the wood, stitched the wound, and bandaged it, but his hands never faltered. When he finished, he gave the injured man instructions for care and a small envelope of powdered willow bark for pain. "Thank you, Mr. O'Malley," the injured man said, but Owen was already packing his instruments away. "You're the new schoolteacher," he said to Zara, not looking up. It wasn't a question. "Yes, Zara Zimmerman." He nodded once, then shouldered his bag. "Keep the wound clean. Change the bandages daily," he instructed, before heading for the door. "Mr. O'Malley," Zara called after him. He paused but didn't turn around. That was impressive work for someone who isn't a doctor anymore. His shoulders tensed visibly. For a moment he said nothing, then, "Sometimes old habits are hard to break. Good day. Miss Zimmerman." He departed as abruptly as he had arrived, leaving whispers in his wake. Zara helped settle the injured man before stepping outside. O'Malley was already mounting a magnificent black stallion, his movements efficient but stiff, as though each one cost him something. "He hasn't done that in years," Mr. Beck said, appearing beside her. "Treated someone, I mean." "Why did he stop practicing medicine?" Zara asked, watching as the rancher rode away, a solitary figure against the vast landscape. Beck shrugged. "War changed him, then his father dying. Some wounds don't show on the outside, miss." Zara nodded thoughtfully. "I believe I'd like to thank him properly. Where exactly is the O'Malley Ranch?" 5 miles north of town. But miss," Beck warned, "Owen O'Malley doesn't welcome visitors." "I'll keep that in mind," Zara replied, her decision already made. The next day, after reviewing the progress on the schoolhouse, Zara borrowed a gentle mare from the livery stable. She told Mrs. Peterson she was exploring the area to better understand her new home, which wasn't entirely untrue. She packed a small basket with fresh bread she'd baked that morning and a jar of preserves, a thank-you gift for O'Malley's assistance the previous day. The ride north of town was peaceful, the late September air crisp but not yet cold. The landscape opened before her rolling grasslands, dotted with stands of aspen trees whose leaves had begun to turn golden. The mountains rose in the distance, their peaks already dusted with early snow. After an hour's ride, Zara spotted the O'Malley Ranch, a well-maintained 2-story house with a large barn and several outbuildings. A split-rail fence enclosed a corral where several horses grazed. Everything spoke of prosperity and care, despite being run by just one man, from what she understood. As she approached the gate, a dog began barking, alerting the ranch's owner to her presence. Moments later, Owen O'Malley emerged from the barn, rifle in hand. He lowered it when he recognized her, but didn't look pleased. "Miss Zimmerman," he called as she dismounted, "this is unexpected." "I wanted to thank you properly for your help yesterday," Zara said, untying her basket from the saddle. "And to return this." She held out a clean, folded handkerchief he had left behind at the general store. O'Malley approached cautiously, as though she were a wild animal that might bolt. Up close, she could better see the lines etched around his eyes. He couldn't be much past 35, but his experiences had clearly left their mark. "You rode all this way to return a handkerchief?" His tone suggested he found this hard to believe. "And to bring you these." She opened the basket. "Freshly baked bread and preserves, a small token of appreciation." He stared at the offering for a long moment before accepting it with a nod. "You shouldn't have troubled yourself." "It was no trouble. I enjoyed the ride." Zara glanced around the well-kept property. "Your ranch is beautiful." Something flickered in his eyes. Pride, perhaps. "My father built it. I just maintain it." "May I water my horse before heading back?" O'Malley hesitated, then gestured toward a water trough. "Help yourself. Would you care for some coffee?" The invitation seemed to surprise him as much as it did her. Zara smiled. "I would, thank you." He led her to the house, a dog, a border collie with intelligent eyes following closely at his heels. The interior was unexpectedly well appointed, with solid furniture and bookshelves lining one wall of the main room. A medical text lay open on a desk in the corner. "You still study medicine?" Zara observed. O'Malley's jaw tightened as he moved to close the book. "Old habits." "Why did you stop practicing? You're clearly skilled." He busied himself with the coffee pot at the stove. "I don't discuss that." "I apologize. I didn't mean to pry." Zara wandered to the bookshelf, noting the diverse collection medical texts alongside philosophy, history, and surprisingly, poetry. "You have an impressive library." "My father's," he replied, though she noticed several newer volumes that suggested otherwise. When he handed her a cup of coffee, their fingers brushed briefly. O'Malley withdrew his hand quickly, as though burned. "How are you finding Concord, Miss Zimmerman?" he asked, clearly attempting to shift the conversation to safer ground. "It's quite different from Boston, but I'm adjusting. The people have been welcoming." She took a sip of coffee, surprised by its rich flavor. "This is excellent. My father traded with a merchant who brought beans from Mexico." A ghost of a smile crossed his features. One of his few indulgences. You were close to him. O'Malley nodded, his gaze drifting to a portrait on the wall, an older gentleman with the same strong jaw and keen eyes as his son. He was a good man. This town relied on him for 30 years. And now they have no doctor, Zara observed quietly. His expression hardened. They have no doctor, he agreed, his tone making it clear the subject was closed. They talked of safer topics. Then the school, the changing seasons, the prospects for the coming winter. Zara found O'Malley surprisingly well informed about current events, despite his isolation, and when he spoke of subjects that interested him, a different man emerged, briefly engaged, thoughtful, almost passionate. All too soon, the lengthening shadows reminded Zara she should return to town before dark. "Thank you for the coffee," she said as O'Malley walked her to her horse. "Thank you for the bread." He hesitated, then added, "You shouldn't ride out here alone, Miss Zimmerman. It's not always safe." "I'll bear that in mind," she replied, though they both knew it wasn't a promise to stay away. As she rode back toward Concord, Zara reflected on the contradictions of Owen O'Malley, a skilled healer who refused to practice, a solitary man with a library of ideas, a person clearly in pain yet unwilling to acknowledge it. Something had broken in him, that much was evident. Whether it could be mended was another question entirely. The schoolhouse was completed the following week, and Zara threw herself into preparing for her students. 27 children were enrolled, ranging from 6 to 16 years of age. The work was demanding but rewarding, and Zara found herself adapting to frontier life more easily than she had expected. She developed a routine teaching during the day, taking her meals at the boarding house and spending evenings preparing lessons or reading. On Saturdays, she often helped at the general store or visited families of her students, gradually becoming part of the community. She didn't see O'Malley again for nearly a month. According to town gossip, he had made his monthly supply run while she was teaching, deliberately avoiding the times when the school might be letting out. Then, one stormy evening in late October, as Zara was closing up the schoolhouse, a rider appeared through the driving rain. Even through the downpour, she recognized O'Malley's tall figure and the distinctive black stallion. "Miss Zimmerman," he called, dismounting quickly. "There's been an accident at the Wilson farm. Their boy fell from the hayloft. They sent for me, but—" He broke off, his expression conflicted. "I need your assistance." Without hesitation, Zara gathered her medical bag expanded since her arrival with supplies ordered from Denver. "Let me leave a note for Mrs. Peterson." Minutes later, she was mounted behind O'Malley on his horse, clinging to his waist as they galloped through the rain toward the Wilson farm 2 miles outside town. She could feel the tension in his body, the rigid control he maintained even as they raced against time. The Wilsons' farmhouse was ablaze with lanterns when they arrived. Inside, 10-year-old Thomas Wilson lay unconscious on the kitchen table, his parents hovering nearby with tear-streaked faces. "He was playing in the barn," Mrs. Wilson explained, voice breaking. "We've told him not to climb so high, but—" "How long has he been unconscious?" O'Malley interrupted, already examining the boy. "About 20 minutes, Mr. Wilson replied. "He was awake right after the fall, talking even, then just went to sleep. We couldn't wake him." Zara watched as O'Malley's hands moved with practiced precision, checking the boy's pupils, feeling along his skull, examining his limbs for breaks. "There's swelling on the right side of his head," he said quietly to Zara. "Possible skull fracture. His right pupil is dilated." "Pressure on the brain?" Zara asked, remembering her father's descriptions of battlefield injuries. O'Malley nodded grimly. "If we don't relieve it—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. "What can we do?" she asked. For a long moment, O'Malley stood frozen, his face a mask of internal conflict. Then he turned to the boy's parents. "Thomas has bleeding inside his skull," he explained. "The blood is putting pressure on his brain. Without surgery, he will die." Mrs. Wilson gasped, clutching her husband's arm. "Surgery? But there's no doctor." "I was an army surgeon," O'Malley said, his voice flat. "I can perform the procedure, but I need to be clear it's extremely dangerous. He could die during the operation." And if you do nothing, Mr. Wilson asked, he will certainly die. The parents exchanged a look of pure anguish before Mr. Wilson nodded. Save our boy, Doctor. O'Malley flinched at the title but turned immediately to practical matters. I need boiling water, all the clean linens you have, your strongest whiskey, and every lamp you can find. Miss Zimmerman will assist me. The next hour passed in a blur of focused intensity. O'Malley sent Zara to his saddlebags to retrieve a set of surgical instruments, polished, oiled, and perfectly maintained, despite his claim that he no longer practiced. Together, they prepared the kitchen for surgery, sterilizing everything as best they could under the circumstances. I'm going to create a small opening in his skull to relieve the pressure, O'Malley explained as he worked. I'll need you to monitor his breathing and pulse and to hand me instruments. Can you do that without becoming faint? Yes, Zara replied firmly. My father took me with him to field hospitals during the war. I've seen surgery before. Something like respect flickered in O'Malley's eyes. He nodded once, then turned to his patient. The procedure was harrowing. O'Malley worked with intense concentration, his hands steady even as sweat beaded on his brow. Zara followed his instructions precisely, handing him instruments, monitoring the boy, sponging blood away from the surgical site. When the pressure was finally relieved and a small silver drain inserted, O'Malley carefully closed the wound. Only then did he step back, rolling down his sleeves. Now we wait, he said quietly. They maintained a vigil through the night, taking turns watching over the boy while his exhausted parents rested nearby. Near dawn, Thomas stirred, mumbling his mother's name. O'Malley was at his side instantly, checking his pupils, asking simple questions that the boy answered groggily but correctly. The pressure is relieved, he told the overjoyed parents. He'll need careful monitoring for infection and complete rest for several weeks, but I believe he'll recover fully. As the sun rose, painting the rain-washed landscape in gold, O'Malley finally stepped outside onto the porch. Zara followed him, carrying 2 cups of fresh coffee. That was remarkable, she said, offering him a cup. You saved his life. O'Malley accepted the coffee but didn't respond immediately. He looked exhausted, the lines in his face deeper than before, but something in his expression had changed. A shadow lifted, if only partially. You were an excellent assistant, he finally said. Most people would have fainted at the first sight of the brain. As I said, I've seen surgery before. My father was a medical assistant in the war. That's partly why I recognized what you did in there for what it was, the work of an exceptional surgeon, not someone who merely picked up skills along the way. O'Malley leaned against a porch post, studying her over the rim of his cup. Your father taught you well. He did. He also taught me that a gift like yours comes with responsibility. She held his gaze steadily. This town needs a doctor, Mr. O'Malley. His expression closed again. I can't. Can't or won't. Does it matter? He set down his cup with a sharp click. I should get you back to town. The ride back to Concord was silent, the countryside fresh and clean after the storm. When they reached the schoolhouse, O'Malley helped her dismount, his hands strong and sure at her waist. Thank you for your help last night, Miss Zimmerman, he said formally. Will you check on Thomas today? He nodded. Yes, and I'll leave instructions for his care. But you won't stay on as their doctor. It wasn't a question. O'Malley's jaw tightened. One emergency doesn't change anything. Doesn't it? Zara challenged. I saw you last night, Mr. O'Malley. For the first time since I've met you, you looked alive. Something flashed in his eyes. Anger, pain, or perhaps recognition of a truth he didn't want to face. Without another word, he mounted his horse and rode away, leaving Zara wondering if she had pushed too far. Word of Thomas Wilson's miraculous surgery spread quickly through Concord. Zara found herself fielding questions from curious townspeople, many of whom viewed O'Malley's intervention as a sign that he might resume his father's practice. He won't, Zara told Mrs. Peterson over breakfast a few days later. Whatever's holding him back, it's powerful enough to overcome even his natural instinct to heal. Mrs. Peterson sighed, buttering her toast. Such a waste. His father would be heartbroken to see his son living like a hermit, turning his back on his calling. "Do you know what happened to him during the war?" Zara asked. The older woman shook her head. "He never speaks of it. Came back in '65, changed from the bright young man who left. Started drinking heavily for a while, though he seems to have overcome that demon at least. His father's illness forced him to pull himself together. Owen cared for him devotedly until the end." "And then withdrew completely," Zara mused, as though he'd fulfilled his last obligation. "Perhaps he did, though I suspect there's more to it than that." Over the next few weeks, Zara threw herself into her teaching duties. The school term was progressing well, with most of her students showing real improvement. She organized a Thanksgiving celebration that brought most of the town together, though O'Malley was noticeably absent. December arrived with bitter cold and heavy snow. The mountains disappeared behind white veils, and Concord settled into the slower rhythms of winter. Zara found herself thinking often of O'Malley, alone on his ranch with only memories for company. On the last day before the Christmas school break, Zara dismissed her students early as heavy snow began to fall. The children scattered quickly, eager to begin their holiday. Zara remained behind, gathering materials she would need for lesson planning during the break. By the time she finished, the snow was falling so thickly she could barely see across the street. She wrapped her heaviest shawl around her shoulders and stepped out into the storm, immediately regretting her decision to stay late. The wind cut through her clothing, and the snow had already accumulated to mid-calf depth. Zara struggled forward, head bent against the driving snow. The normally short walk to the boarding house seemed interminable in these conditions. She had gone perhaps halfway when her foot struck something buried beneath the snow, pitching her forward. She threw out her hands to break her fall, feeling a sharp pain shoot through her right wrist as she landed. For a moment, she lay stunned in the snow, the wind knocking the breath from her lungs. When she tried to stand, her ankle gave way beneath her, sending her back to her knees with a cry of pain. "Hello?" she called, but her voice was swallowed by the howling wind. The street was deserted, everyone already huddled indoors against the blizzard. Fighting rising panic, Zara began to crawl toward the nearest building, each movement sending sharp pains through her wrist and ankle. The cold seeped through her sodden clothing, numbing her fingers and face. She had almost reached the boardwalk when strong hands suddenly gripped her shoulders. "Miss Zimmerman!" Through snow-crusted lashes, she looked up to see Owen O'Malley's concerned face. "I fell," she managed through chattering teeth. "My ankle." Without hesitation, O'Malley swept her into his arms. "Hold on," he instructed, his voice close to her ear as he carried her through the storm. Rather than heading toward Mrs. Peterson's, he made for the doctor's office, his father's old practice, now shuttered but still maintained. Fumbling with keys one-handed, he managed to unlock the door and carry Zara inside. The office was cold but sheltered from the wind. O'Malley set Zara gently in a chair, then moved quickly to light the stove. As warmth gradually filled the room, he turned his attention back to her. "We need to get you out of those wet clothes," he said professionally. "I'll find something dry." He disappeared into a back room, returning with a woolen blanket and what appeared to be a man's shirt and trousers. "These were my father's. They'll be too large, but they're warm and dry." He turned his back discreetly while Zara struggled out of her wet dress, her injured wrist making the task difficult. The shirt indeed swam on her, but the fabric was soft and blessedly dry. "I'm decent," she said when she had finished. O'Malley turned back, his clinical gaze assessing her condition. "Let me see that wrist." His touch was gentle as he examined the injury, his fingers probing carefully. "A sprain, I think, not broken. Your ankle." "It twisted when I fell. I don't think it's serious, just painful." He knelt to remove her wet stocking and examine her ankle, his touch impersonal, yet somehow intimate. "Also sprained. You're lucky in this cold. A more serious injury could have been dangerous." As he wrapped her ankle with practiced efficiency, Zara studied him. "What brought you to town today? I thought you avoided Concord when possible." A faint flush colored his cheekbones. Supplies, he said shortly. Got caught in the storm. Fortunate timing for me, she observed. He finished with her ankle and moved to wrap her wrist, his focus on his task. You should stay here until the storm passes. It's not safe to move through this blizzard. Thank you. Zara hesitated, then added, This is the first time I've been inside your father's office. It's well maintained for a place that's not in use. O'Malley's hands stilled briefly. I keep it clean, out of respect. Or perhaps hope? His eyes flashed to hers, a warning in their depths. Don't, Miss Zimmerman. Don't what? Suggest that part of you still wants to be a doctor? That you maintain this office because somewhere inside, you know it's where you belong? You know nothing about me or what I belong to do, he said tersely, rising to his feet. I know you saved Thomas Wilson's life, Zara replied calmly. I know your hands are steadier than any surgeon I've ever seen. I know you keep medical texts open on your desk and surgical instruments polished and ready for use. Habits, he dismissed, turning away. No, not just habits. Calling. She stood, wincing as she put weight on her injured ankle. Why are you punishing yourself, Mr. O'Malley? What happened during the war that makes you deny your gift? Enough! The word exploded from him with such force that Zara took an involuntary step back. O'Malley's face was white with some emotion she couldn't quite name, rage perhaps, or grief so deep it had hardened into something like anger. For a long moment, silence hung between them, broken only by the howl of the wind outside and the crackling of the stove. Then O'Malley's shoulders slumped as though something vital had gone out of him. Antietam, he said quietly. I was stationed at a field hospital at Antietam. Zara knew the name, one of the bloodiest battles of the war, where thousands had died in a single day. There were so many wounded, O'Malley continued, his voice distant. We worked for days without rest, amputations mostly the only way to prevent gangrene with such limited resources. He moved to the window, staring out at the swirling snow. On the third day, they brought in a young Confederate soldier, gut shot. He needed immediate surgery, but there were others waiting who had better chances. By triage standards, he should have been made comfortable and allowed to die. Zara remained silent, sensing he needed to tell the story in his own way. But he looked so much like my younger brother. Same age, same coloring. I broke protocol, operated on him first, spent precious time trying to save him. His hands clenched into fists. He died anyway. And while I was trying to save him, 3 Union soldiers who might have survived with prompt attention also died. You made a human choice, Zara said softly. O'Malley shook his head. I made a selfish choice. A doctor must be objective, must make decisions based on medical necessity, not personal feeling. He turned to face her, his expression bleak. After the war, I tried to practice here with my father, but I kept second-guessing every decision, doubting my judgment, started drinking to silence the doubts. But you stopped drinking, Zara pointed out. You overcame that. When my father fell ill, yes. He needed me sober. A shadow crossed his face. I promised him I'd take over his practice when he was gone. It's the only promise to him I've ever broken. Zara took a careful step toward him. It's not too late to keep it, isn't it? His laugh held no humor. The last medical decision I made, choosing to operate on that Confederate boy, cost 3 lives. What if I make another mistake? This town deserves better than a doctor who can't trust his own judgment. You trusted your judgment with Thomas Wilson, Zara reminded him, and you were right. You saved him. One success doesn't erase my failures. No, Zara agreed, but it proves you still have the skill, the knowledge, the rest the confidence, the trust in yourself that can return with practice. She closed the distance between them, looking up into his troubled face. Concord needs a doctor, Owen. Not a perfect one. There's no such thing, but one who cares enough to try. One who understands that medicine isn't just science, but humanity. For a breathless moment, something vulnerable flickered in his eyes. Then he stepped away, rebuilding his walls. You should rest. I'll make some coffee. The storm raged through the afternoon and into the evening. They talked of safer subjects, books they had both read, memories of Boston where O'Malley had studied medicine, Zara's experiences teaching. As night fell and the office grew dim, O'Malley lit lamps and added wood to the stove. "You should take the examination room," he said, nodding toward a door at the back. "There's a cot there. I'll be fine out here." "Thank you." Zara rose carefully, testing her ankle. "It feels better already. Stay off it as much as possible for the next few days, and keep that wrist elevated when you sleep." She smiled at the automatic medical advice. "Yes, doctor." His expression tightened, but he didn't correct her. The examination room was small but neat, with a narrow cot against one wall. A bookshelf held medical texts, and framed credentials hung on the wall, both the elder Dr. O'Malley's and, Zara noted with interest, his son's. She was nearly asleep when a knock at the door roused her. "Miss Zimmerman?" O'Malley's voice was urgent. "We're needed." Zara opened the door to find him pulling on his coat. "What's happened?" "Mrs. Collins has gone into labor. Her husband just arrived, trudged through the blizzard to get here. The baby's coming early. And there are complications." "But the storm." "We have no choice," he cut her off. "Her husband says she's bleeding heavily. Without help, both she and the baby could die." Zara didn't hesitate. "I'll get dressed." Minutes later, they were following Mr. Collins through the blinding snow. O'Malley had insisted Zara ride his horse while he walked alongside, one hand on the reins to guide them. The Collins farm was only a half-mile from town, but the journey seemed endless in the storm. The farmhouse was warm but filled with tension. Sarah Collins lay on her bed, her face gray with pain and blood loss, while her mother-in-law hovered nearby, her expression fearful. O'Malley took charge immediately. "How long between contractions?" "About 2 minutes," the mother-in-law replied. "But something's wrong." "There's too much blood." O'Malley performed a swift examination, his face grave. "The placenta is separating prematurely. The baby needs to be delivered immediately." He turned to Zara. "I'll need your assistance again." What followed was a desperate race against time. The delivery was difficult, with Sarah Collins weakening with each contraction. O'Malley worked with focused intensity, his earlier hesitation completely gone, replaced by absolute certainty in his actions. When the baby finally emerged, a tiny girl with a shock of dark hair, she was blue and silent. "Breathe," O'Malley commanded, clearing the infant's airways and rubbing her back vigorously. For a terrifying moment, nothing happened. Then, the baby gave a weak cry, her color slowly improving. "Take her," O'Malley instructed Zara, already turning back to the mother, who continued to bleed alarmingly. For the next hour, he fought to save Sarah Collins, applying techniques Zara had never seen before, working with a combination of modern medicine and frontier practicality. By dawn, the bleeding was finally controlled, and both mother and baby were resting, weak but stable. As they stepped outside into the now quiet morning, the storm having blown itself out overnight, Zara studied O'Malley's exhausted face. "You just saved 2 lives," she said softly. He looked toward the horizon where the rising sun glinted off fresh snow. "It was close, too close. But you didn't hesitate. You knew exactly what to do." "I had no choice." "There's always a choice, Owen." She used his given name deliberately. "You chose to come here tonight. You chose to use your skills. And because of those choices, a mother will see her child grow up." He said nothing, but something in his posture had changed, a rigidity gone, perhaps, or a burden slightly lightened. They rode double on his horse back to town, Zara's arms around his waist, her cheek resting against his broad back. The landscape sparkled in the morning sun, pristine and renewed by the storm. At the doctor's office, O'Malley helped her dismount, his hands lingering briefly at her waist. "I should check your ankle and wrist," he said, his professional manner returning. Inside, he examined her injuries with the same care he'd shown the night before. "The swelling has improved. Keep them wrapped for another few days." "I will." Zara hesitated, then placed her hand over his where it rested on her wrist. "What happens now, Owen?" He looked up, confusion in his eyes. "What do you mean? You've practiced medicine twice in the past month after years of refusal. You can't pretend it didn't happen. You can't go back to your self-imposed exile and act as though this town doesn't need you." O'Malley withdrew his hand, his expression closing. "I did what was necessary in emergencies. That doesn't mean—" "It means exactly that you're still a doctor," Zara interrupted, frustration coloring her voice. "It means you still have the skills, the knowledge, and most importantly, the instinct to heal. Why can't you accept that?" "Because I don't trust myself." The words burst from him, raw and honest. "Because every time I make a medical decision, I remember those boys at Antietam who died because of my mistake." "One mistake in the midst of a horrific battle doesn't define your entire career," Zara argued. "And isolating yourself, denying your calling that's not honoring those who died. It's wasting the gift you could be using to save others. You don't understand." "I understand pain, Owen. I understand loss." Zara's voice softened. "My father never recovered from what he saw during the war. He came home changed, like you. But he didn't stop teaching. He poured his pain into his work, used it to fuel his compassion." She stepped closer, looking up into his troubled face. "You've been strong for so long, carrying this burden alone, punishing yourself. But it's enough now. You've been strong long enough." Something broke in O'Malley's expression, a dam crumbling after holding back a flood for years. He turned away, but not before Zara saw the moisture gathering in his eyes. "I don't know if I can," he said, his voice barely audible. "You already have," she replied gently. "With Thomas Wilson, with Sarah Collins and her baby. You were the doctor they needed, not perfect, not infallible, but present and skilled and caring." Silence fell between them, thick with unspoken emotions. Finally, O'Malley turned back to her, his face composed, but his eyes revealing a vulnerability she hadn't seen before. "I need time," he said, "to think." Zara nodded. "Of course." She gathered her things, now dry from the night near the stove. "Thank you for your help yesterday, with my injuries and everything else." At the door, she paused, looking back at him standing in the center of his father's office, a man at a crossroads. "Merry Christmas, Owen." His smile was faint but genuine. "Merry Christmas, Zara." The holiday week passed quietly. Zara joined Mrs. Peterson and several other boarders for Christmas dinner, exchanged modest gifts, and enjoyed the simple celebrations of a frontier town. She thought often of O'Malley, wondering if he was spending the holiday alone on his ranch, or if he had found some peace in the aftermath of their conversation. New Year's Day brought fresh snow and a knock at Mrs. Peterson's door. Zara, helping with the breakfast dishes, heard Mrs. Peterson's exclamation of surprise. "Dr. O'Malley, what a pleasant surprise." Zara's hands stilled in the dishwater. She dried them quickly and moved to the doorway of the kitchen, her heart beating faster at the sight of Owen O'Malley standing in the entrance hall, hat in hand. He looked different somehow, still lean and weathered, but with a new light in his eyes, a purpose in his bearing. "Good morning, Mrs. Peterson," he said politely. "I hope I'm not intruding. I was wondering if I might speak with Miss Zimmerman." Mrs. Peterson beamed. "Of course, she's right here. I'll just see to the dining room." She bustled away, not even attempting to disguise her curiosity. Owen's eyes found Zara, a smile touching his lips. "You're looking well. How's the ankle?" "Completely healed," she replied, returning his smile. "And the wrist is much better." "Good." He shifted slightly, betraying an uncharacteristic nervousness. "Would you care to take a walk? There's something I'd like to show you." Curious, Zara fetched her coat and bonnet. Outside, the morning was crisp but sunny, the new snow glittering under a clear blue sky. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," Owen said as they walked toward the center of town. "About what you said. About my father's legacy. About my calling." Zara's heart quickened. "And?" He stopped in front of his father's office, The windows, dusty just a week ago, now gleamed in the winter sunlight. A fresh coat of paint brightened the trim, and a new sign hung beside the door. Dr. Owen O'Malley, physician and surgeon. "You were right," he said quietly. "I've been punishing myself long enough. This town needs a doctor, and while I may not be the perfect choice, I'm the only choice they have." Joy spread through Zara's chest. "Owen, that's wonderful." "I can't promise I won't have doubts," he warned. "The memories, the guilt, they don't simply disappear. But perhaps, as you suggested, I can channel them into becoming a better doctor." "That's all anyone can ask," Zara said warmly. "To try their best with the gifts they've been given." Owen's expression grew more serious. "There's something else." He reached into his coat and withdrew a small package wrapped in brown paper. "A late Christmas gift, or perhaps an early birthday gift, as I understand yours is in February." Surprised, Zara accepted the package. Inside was a book, a beautiful leather-bound collection of poetry by Elizabeth Barrett Browning. Her fingers traced the embossed cover reverently. "How did you know I love her work?" A faint flush colored Owen's cheeks. "You mentioned it that night in my office. I remembered." "It's beautiful, thank you." Zara looked up at him, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift and what it represented that he had listened, had remembered something personal about her. "I have something else to ask you," Owen said, his voice low. "The town council has approached me about resuming my father's practice full-time. I've agreed, but I've made one condition: that the school and the medical practice work together on matters of public health." Zara's eyes widened. "That's an excellent idea. I thought perhaps we might meet regularly to discuss how best to implement hygiene education, vaccination programs, that sort of thing." His expression was carefully neutral, but Zara sensed there was more to the invitation than professional collaboration. "I would like that very much," she replied softly. Something warm kindled in his eyes. "Perhaps we could begin with dinner tomorrow evening?" "I'd be delighted." As they walked back toward Mrs. Peterson's, their steps matching naturally, Zara felt a sense of rightness, of pieces falling into place. The road ahead would not be easy. Owen's healing had only just begun, and the challenges of frontier life remained, but they had taken the first steps together. Winter gradually yielded to spring, and with the changing season came a transformation in Concord. The doctor's office became a center of community life once more, and Owen O'Malley, though still reserved, emerged from his self-imposed isolation to take his place among his neighbors. Zara watched his evolution with joy and growing affection. Their professional collaboration blossomed into a deep friendship and, as the months passed, into something more. Their weekly meetings to discuss public health initiatives became dinners, long walks, shared books, and conversations that lasted into the evening. By summer, it was common to see the schoolteacher and the doctor walking together along the river or sharing a table at the town's small restaurant. Speculation ran rampant among Concord's residents, but both Zara and Owen maintained a proper distance in public, their growing feelings a private matter. On a warm August evening, exactly 1 year after Zara's arrival in Concord, Owen invited her to dinner at his ranch. He met her at the edge of town with his buggy, and they drove through the golden late afternoon light toward the mountains. The ranch looked different from Zara's first visit. Flowers bloomed in beds that had previously been bare, and the house had a lived-in warmth that had been missing before. "It's beautiful," she said as Owen helped her from the buggy. "You've made changes." "It needed a woman's touch," he admitted. "Mrs. Wilson has been helping with the garden, in gratitude for Thomas." Inside, Owen had prepared dinner himself, a simple but delicious meal of roast beef, fresh vegetables from his garden, and apple pie from the town bakery. They ate on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of pink and gold. "I've been thinking about my father lately," Owen said as they lingered over coffee, "about how he would feel seeing me now." "He'd be proud," Zara said confidently, "not just of your return to medicine, but of the man you've become." Owen smiled, the expression now coming more naturally to him. "I think he would have liked you very much." I wish I could have met him. So do I. Owen set down his cup and turned to face her fully. This past year has been transformative. I was lost when you found me, Zara. Living but not alive. You gave me back my purpose, my calling. You found those things yourself, she corrected gently. I merely reminded you they were there. You did much more than that. He reached for her hand, his touch warm and sure. You showed me that the past doesn't have to define the future, that mistakes, even terrible ones, can be stepping stones rather than stumbling blocks. The look in his eyes made Zara's heart beat faster. I'm glad, she said softly. There's something I've wanted to ask you for some time now. Owen's voice held a note of nervousness she rarely heard from him. Something important. Before he could continue, the sound of approaching hoofbeats interrupted them. Owen frowned, rising to his feet as a rider galloped into the yard. Dr. O'Malley, the man called, dismounting hastily. There's been an accident at the lumber mill. Several men injured. They're bringing them to your office now. Owen was already moving, medical instincts taking over. How serious? Bad, Doc. Saw a blade broke. One man lost an arm, others with deep cuts. I'll come immediately. Owen turned to Zara, regret in his eyes. I'm sorry. Don't be, she interrupted, already gathering her things. This is who you are. Let me help. Together they rode back to town, where chaos greeted them. 4 injured men had been brought to Owen's office, blood soaking through hasty bandages. Without hesitation, Owen took charge, assessing injuries and prioritizing care. Zara, I need you to assist with the amputee, he said, his voice calm despite the emergency. The others can wait, but he'll die of blood loss if we don't act quickly. For the next several hours, they worked side by side, Owen performing surgery while Zara assisted, anticipating his needs, providing steady support. By dawn, all 4 men were stabilized, their most serious injuries treated. As the first light of morning filtered through the windows, Owen washed blood from his hands, fatigue evident in the slump of his shoulders. You should rest, Zara said, touching his arm gently. He shook his head. I need to monitor Johnson. That amputation was difficult. I can watch him. You've been operating for hours. Owen looked at her with such warmth that Zara felt it in the center of her chest. What would I do without you? Fortunately, you don't have to find out, she smiled. I'm not going anywhere. Something shifted in Owen's expression, a decision made. He dried his hands and took hers, leading her to the quiet of his private office. This isn't how I planned it, he said, his voice rough with fatigue but determined. I had a speech prepared, dinner, a proper setting. But seeing you tonight, working alongside me, being exactly what I needed exactly when I needed it, he drew a deep breath. I can't wait any longer. From his desk drawer, he withdrew a small box. Kneeling before her, he opened it to reveal a simple gold ring set with a single diamond. Zara Zimmerman, you found me when I was at my lowest, hiding from my pain behind walls of isolation and guilt. You said I'd been strong long enough, and you were right. With you, I don't have to be strong alone. His eyes, clear and certain, held hers. I love you. Will you marry me? Joy bubbled up inside her, bright and unstoppable. Yes, she said simply. Yes, Owen, I love you too. The ring slid onto her finger, a perfect fit. Owen rose and gathered her into his arms, his kiss gentle at first, then deepening with a year's worth of growing love. They were married in October when the aspens turned gold against the blue Colorado sky. The entire town attended, celebrating not just the union of 2 beloved residents, but the restoration of their doctor and the completion of their community. Zara continued teaching, while Owen's practice thrived. Together they implemented health programs in the school, reduced childhood illnesses through vaccination, and brought modern medical practices to their frontier town. Their professional partnership strengthened their personal one, each supporting the other's work. In the spring of 1875, their first child was born, a son they named Michael, after Owen's father. 2 years later, a daughter, Elizabeth, joined their family. The O'Malley Ranch became a warm and lively home, filled with books, learning, and laughter. As the years passed, Concord grew from a rough frontier settlement into a proper town. A railroad spur brought increased commerce and new residents. Zara eventually became principal of the expanded school, while Owen trained a young doctor to assist him as the community's needs increased. On their 10th anniversary, Owen took Zara back to the spot where she had first found him, the ranch house porch with its view of the mountains. "Do you ever think about what might have happened if you hadn't come to Concord?" he asked, his arm around her shoulders as they watched the sunset. Zara leaned into his embrace. "Sometimes. But then I remember what my father used to say, that life has a way of putting us where we need to be, even when we don't know we need to be there." Owen's fingers traced the silver, beginning to thread through her dark hair. He was a wise man. I wish I could have thanked him for raising a daughter stubborn enough to drag a broken man back into the light. "You weren't broken, Owen," Zara said softly, "just wounded, and wounds heal, given proper care." "They do indeed." He kissed her temple gently. "Thanks to the best medicine of all." "And what's that, doctor?" she asked, smiling up at him. "Love, Mrs. O'Malley," he replied, his eyes still holding the wonder of a man who had found something he thought forever lost. Simply love. Behind them, their children's laughter drifted from the house where they played under the watchful eye of Mrs. Wilson, now their housekeeper. Before them stretched the mountains, unchanged yet ever-changing with the seasons. And between them flowed the current that had brought them together, a recognition of pain, an offer of solace, and the courage to begin again. In the years that followed, their story became part of Concord's history, the Eastern schoolteacher who had found the wounded cowboy doctor and helped him heal both himself and their community. But for Owen and Zara, it was simply their life, built day by day on a foundation of shared purpose and enduring love. Each morning, Owen still woke before dawn to make his rounds, the habits of a country doctor ingrained after decades of practice, and each evening, he returned to Zara, who had long ago taught him the most important lesson of all, that strength is not found in standing alone, but in the courage to reach for another's hand when the burden becomes too heavy to bear. Together, they faced the changing frontier, raised their children to adulthood, welcomed grandchildren, and watched their small town grow into the new century. Through it all, they remained each other's constant, the teacher and the doctor, partners in work and life, bound by a love that had begun with a simple truth spoken on a ranch porch long ago. "You've been strong long enough.